Okay, so this is a short user experience talk, and this is part 2 of 4. So at this point we've looked at the possibility of how you interrogate a problem, and it might have given you a host of ideas of how you need to solve that problem. And of course you might be thinking, great, I've got the answer now, ready to go. Well, actually that's just the start. So you don't want to think that you have the answer at this point. Sure, you may have thought of a few things and you might have decided that you think you know a way of solving this, but that is something to be super wary of when it comes to designing solutions through design thinking and providing great user experience or humanity-centered design. So the first exercise that you want to undertake once you've thought about the problem you want to solve is some of the assumptions that you might have been making in terms of how to solve that problem, and to think about those and to list those out. And that is an exercise called assumption mapping. So there's a great way to remember this at the start of any project. If you take the word assume, you can break that down, and if you do that, then as you can see, it will make an ass out of you and me. So we need to think clearly about our assumptions, and we can do this through this assumption mapping. Now I'll give you a quick example of an assumption mapping process that could be done in the real world. So Dropbox, one of the biggest assumptions, and they mapped out to figure out which one that was, and the one that contained the highest risk, and again we're going to go through how you can figure these things out, was that they assumed people would want to store their files in the cloud. That's a big assumption based on what their business model was going to be. This was the highest risk and the thing they knew the least about. So they needed to test that assumption to figure out whether people did actually want to store stuff in the cloud. Because if they didn't, they would be building a service that no one wanted. So prior to building any type of service, all Dropbox did was set up a website which explained the proposition of Dropbox and asked if you were interested in signing up to this product to put your email address in. And that would see whether people were interested at all in the idea of storing all of their files in the cloud. They hadn't built any servers, they hadn't built any infrastructure, and they hadn't hired any developers. At this point, they probably hired more a marketing team to explain what they were doing. So obviously, Dropbox had a lot of people signing up and realized that their assumption was valid, and that people did want to actually store stuff in the cloud, and that they had made the correct assumption there. Now, Dropbox may have done this through the same process outlined here. So this is in a process called assumption mapping. So what you do then is you take your problem and you note that down, and then you write down all of the assumptions that you have related to trying to fix that problem. So just list them all out in no particular order and try and get as many out as possible. And none of them are kind of bad ideas, but it's really good to go through all of the list. So in doing so, what you should then end up with is quite a lot of notes. And the way to do this is to use post-its. Every good design studio has 1,000 post-its. So get your problem, write down all of the assumptions that you think are there. And then you map this against a diagram like so. So I'm just going to explain this. So the idea is you're looking to map your assumptions against the least important and most important. So that'll be based on the business you're trying to build or the problem you're trying to solve. And those that you know the most about and those that you know the least about. So what are you unaware of? What do you not know? And what is most important? And what we're looking for is the ones that we really want to test and find out whether those assumptions are true or not, is the ones that sit up in the top right corner. So it's ones that are the most important and the ones that are the most unknown. So Dropbox's example was the most important one for them, was they wanted people to store files in the cloud. So their assumption was people will store files in the cloud. But this was unknown. No one else was really storing files in the cloud. They're all stored on local desktops, or they were stored on servers by server administrators, not by everyday people. So that was most important because that's what their business was going to be built on, but they didn't know. They couldn't guess. So that would have been the first thing they test. And basically you're looking to test those that sit up in that top corner. If you get through a number of those, then you know that your idea probably has something to stand on and something you can work with. So that's really good. The other thing to do in conjunction with this is gather lots of data to help enhance testing assumptions or to find better ones. And you should obviously gather this research through both qualitative and quantitative. So you can do, research interviews, workshops, user tests, user analytics, and there's a bunch of these. Again, they can sit on a little diagram here to see which ones sit in which spaces. So again, think about how you do this, and of course you've got bits in there like competitor analysis, some searches, some analytics, some contextual inquiry, and of course those will help you to build up a set of assumptions. So that's really, really important. Okay, so user-centered design and its mindset of bringing users into the design process exists to reduce gaps between who is creating a product and who is using it. So that's what user experience is about. It's about closing the gap between those people, so the people who are making the thing and the people that are using the thing, or the people that have created the system and the people that are using that system. So it doesn't matter whether that's a product, whether it's a workflow, whether it's something to change in the society of an organization. The idea is to reduce that gap between people. You can obviously do that, lots of these things in terms of general research. So there's some great books here that are worth checking out. So we've got a book apart there, a book called Just Enough Research. There's another book there about how you interview users, and I've found the Steve Krug Rocket Surgery Made Easy has got a fantastic set of guides to help you to set up user experience sessions, particularly when interviewing potential users, and allowing you to really go through the process of particularly later on testing those assumptions and building those prototypes to be tested on your behalf. There is also a really great book now available as a free PDF, which is a short pocket guide on how you go about interviewing for research purposes. So you can take all those assumptions that you've now mapped, and you can work out how you might use that information to then drive maybe some more research or a number of things like that. So just to recap, in this instance, it's really important to think about the problem that you're undertaking, what that problem might be, and then list the assumptions. No assumptions can be too stupid. It's really important to list them out, because what you're trying to figure out is what you think you know about a problem and how you think it might then be solved. And you can do this at various stages, but it's really important at the very beginning. When you've got a problem, you want to write down how you think it's going to be solved, and of course map it onto here, so then you can do that testing. You can follow that up with user testing. You can gather some more assumptions through your research, etc. So that's something to really, really engage upon. Okay, so that is the end of the short second clip. We're going to move into some more processes, but this is just really focused on the initial stages. And I think, that research into the area you're looking at, interviewing those potential users, thinking about the assumptions that you've made in terms of the problem you're trying to solve. Another quick tip is that you can do obviously online surveys. They're really easy. Don't necessarily provide the greatest of data to begin with, but if you get some great open questions and try and target those, so it helps you to unpick where you're trying to go. And don't forget, you might find that you don't need a solution for the problem you're trying to work with. There's a service called typeform.com, and they've just released a new version in 2018, which is worth checking out, which gives you loads of new features. Okay, so